Shabbos comes every week. So let's talk a little bit about Shabbos. I'd like to ask you an interesting question. The first time I saw it, I was intrigued and I thought it was ridiculous. But as I thought about it, it actually was a pretty good question. How does the world exist on Shabbos? If God rests on Shabbos, it means He's not creating the world. So how does the world exist? Let me backtrack a minute. We're told, we say in davening, in the bracha of Yotzer Or, we say, HaMachadesh betuvay b'chol yom tamid. That God renews Maisa Bereshis every day, tamid, constantly. So Nefesh HaChaim tells us that means that if God were to refrain and hold back His creation of the world, then the world would cease to exist. HaMachadesh betuvay b'chol yom tamid Maisa Bereshis. It's constant. So now you understand the question. If God rests from Maisa Bereshis on Shabbos, Shavas, that means He doesn't create. So then how can the world exist on Shabbos? This is a question that was posed by both worlds, the Hasidic and the Litvisha world. This is a question that the Baal Tanya poses, and this is a question that the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, also deals with. Let me read to you the answer of the Vilna Gaon, and let's try to understand it. He says, Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshis, v'chidush ma'aseh bereshis l'yom haShabbos. This renewal of the work of creation for Shabbos, Huchan miyom esmol, was prepared the day before. Ubayom Shabbos af shavas af imenu. And on Shabbos, Hashem was shavis. He didn't do that as well. V'zeu shamar mikol v'havein. And let's understand this. Okay, we got the question. Part 2. There's a halacha on Shabbos called Iker and Tafel. We know in Hilchos Brachos there's a concept of Iker and Tafel, something which is the main and something which is secondary to that. And when you have it in Hilchos Brachos, it means when you have an Iker and Tafel and you want to make a bracha, you can make a bracha on the Iker, and the Tafel just gets followed along with that. On Shabbos we also have a halacha of Iker and Tafel. And that plays out in the halachas of Hoitzah. There's an Isser D'Oraisa to take something from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, from Rishus Rabim into Rishus HaYachid. So if you live in a place where a Rishus Rabim, there's, let's say, no Erev, and it's a Rishus HaRabim, so for you to go from your house, and you want to, let's say, bring your friend a bowl of cholent, so you're going to bring him a bowl of cholent outside and he's standing in the street, so that would be the malacha of Haitzah. Now, as in all malachas, there's a shear, there's an amount that's required to that you have to be mitzvah, you have to take out in order to be chayiv. So let's say you were to take out a little bit of cholent, what we call pachas mikashir. Right, you give him a bean, pachas mikashir of cholent, and you bring it out in a bowl. So here the halacha changes. Here the halacha says that mid'oraisa, the shvis, we don't say that you're contradicting being the shvis of Shabbos. We don't consider that a malacha d'oraisa. Why? Because you're being mitzi pachas mikashir. Okay, but the problem is you're taking it out in a bowl. The bowl is a shear. The bowl has got the right size to be chayiv for. So here the Gemara tells us that bowl is tafel to the ikr. Your intent here is to give the guy a piece of cholent. The bowl is their secondary. Being that the bowl is just is secondary in nature to the cholent, your putter also on the bowl. That's the halacha of Iker and Tafel when it comes to Haitzah. So Rav Hutner, in his first Maimer in Pachad Yitzchak on Shabbos, he says, let's draw a parallel. The world is created. There's Maisa Bereshis. Now what was the world? What was the tachlis of the world? The world was created with Asar Ma'amaras, 10 utterances of creation. He says that those 10 utterances correspond to another 10. Those are the 10 dibris, Aseres HaDibris. And that teaches us that the tachlis, the real goal of all of the ma'amaras of creation, were for the 10 dibris, were for the Torah. When does that shift? What is the Iker and what's the Tafel? So a whole week during Ma'aseh Bereishis, the Iker is the malacha of the week. But what happens on Shabbos? On Shabbos, all of that malacha takes on a secondary nature. When we realize what the Tachlis is, the Tachlis is Shabbos, the Tachlis is the Torah. So then all of those utterances take on a secondary nature. And in Hilchah Shabbos we learn when something is tafel to the Iker, when it's secondary, it doesn't have to cease to exist to be considered Shavas. As long as it's secondary in nature, it can continue without having to stop. So the malacha on Shabbos can continue. Hashem could be Mechadesh B'chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh Bereishis even on Shabbos, because on Shabbos it's only secondary to the goal of the Aseret Adibros, to the goal of Shabbos. Wow. What gives the ability to place a value on something? In order to have an Iker and a Tafel, we have to assign value. What function of, what created function, what allows us to assign value? That's called Das. When you make a decision, we call it a shikol hadas. So to assign value and to make a decision, erech in Hebrew is value. Hachra'ah, a decision, has the same letters as the letters of erech. Value and hachra are very similar because to make a decision, we have to assign value. So what assigns value? The das. When was Das created? When was knowledge, the ability to make a value judgment, when was that created? With the creation of man. Nasa Adam, the last of the Ma'amaris, the 10th Maimer. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, let's create man, that was the ability to make a value judgment, to make something an Iker and a Tafel. Let's go back to the words of the Gra. The Gra says, we have a problem. How does God create on Shabbos? He says the Ma'aseh Bereishis was already prepared on Friday. Where was the preparation? In the creation of man. The creation of Das allows for there to be an Iker and a Tafel, to allow us to realize that what's the Iker of creation, what was the point, what's the Tachlis of this world? That's Shabbos, that's Kedusha, that's the Torah, that's the mitzvahs. When we have that appreciation, everything else in creation we can continue doing because it takes on a secondary nature. Have a very deep Shabbos.